There is something that every professional artist uses in their art that you might not be utilizing to its fullest yet. Something that allows them to make their colors pop and have complete control over all of their colors. The secret trick that they all use? Layer modes. Wait, don't leave yet. You might think that you already know everything there is to know about layer modes already. A multiply layer to create shadows for you, or an overlay layer to boost the contrast. But what about all of the other layer modes? What about screen, brightness, or divide? What do all of these layer modes do? In this video, I'll go over all of the layer modes and teach you how to utilize them for your own art. I think the first thing that we should get out of the way is what layer modes actually are. In almost all digital art programs, there are many different types of layer modes. Some of these have different names between the programs, but they all function the same way. If you add a layer on top of another layer with a layer mode on it, it will change the color that is applied to your canvas when you draw. These layer modes apply a sort of filter on top of the things that you draw, and can be used for many purposes, but the main purpose of them is to speed up the process of choosing colors. Although you could manually pick colors and end up with the same result, understanding what these layer modes do and learning how to use them efficiently can help you greatly if you want to draw like the pros. To begin with, these layer modes can be broken down into a couple different groups: Darken, Lighten, Contrast, Inversion, and Component. Let's start off with some interesting ones first. The component group: hue, saturation, color, and brightness. These are the ones I find the most interesting because they act a bit differently from the other layer modes. The naming of these modes are quite intuitive as they allow you to change the hue, saturation, color, and brightness of an image respectively. I find that they are similar to the color adjustment sliders, but with much more granular control over the colors. Let's use saturation for an example. I made a saturation layer on top and will clip it to the layer below. After I fill the layer with white, I will make it desaturated. Now I'll apply a color with full saturation from our color wheel, and as you can expect, it made the color more saturated. The best part about changing saturation with a layer mode is that we can now use any of our brushes to apply this effect. This means we can use something like an airbrush to apply saturation to where we want it, or remove saturation from an area where we don't want it. If the layer mode ever changes too much of the original colors, you can also lower the opacity of the layer to tone down this effect. This applies to all the other layer modes too, so it can be something you can fiddle around with if you find that the effect is too strong. While we are on the topic, I'll quickly demonstrate it with hue as well. Let's say, for example, you want to change the color of an eye that you rendered, but you don't want to redo the entire piece. Well, with the hue layer mode on top, you can do it easily and quickly. It works well for this case especially because you don't have to make a mask on the layer or select the eye manually with a wand or a select tool. You can just paint over with your brush and quickly look at another color without redoing everything. Of course, there are drawbacks to this method, but I think you can see how useful this can be to try different colors on an illustration on a whim. Color mode works a bit differently, but it can be used for something else that is very important for rendering. A color mode preserves the gray values of a piece of art, so it works really well if you want to go from grayscale to color. Apply a color mode layer to a black and white piece and start applying colors to anywhere you want, without having to worry about the values. My favorite way of using this layer mode is to use it in conjunction with gradient maps. This allows you to keep the values that you made in grayscale, while adding colors to the actual illustration. If you've ever seen an artist work from grayscale to color, then they have most likely used this layer mode for this exact reason. If you don't already know, filling a color layer mode with black or white can also be used to check the values of an illustration quickly. This can help you see if your values are too similar and help you determine if you want to add more contrast or change pieces of the illustration. Although it won't perfectly show you the correct values, it will be close enough for most use cases that I find it the most useful. Next up is brightness. As you can expect, it will change the brightness of an image without affecting the hue or saturation. I don't use this layer mode often, but it can be helpful if you want to use tone curves on an illustration without having your saturation being affected. Let's say, for example, I wanted to darken the colors of this illustration, but I don't want the color's saturation or hue to be changed. Using a brightness layer mode will achieve that effect for me and will lower the brightness of the image without affecting the saturation. Next up on the list of layer modes are darken modes. For this example, I'll be using one of the ones that I use on a regular basis, multiply. If I take a piece that I have without any lighting added, you can see the effect clearly. I will take a lighter color, fill the layer with it, and clip it to the layer below. This has darkened the colors that were underneath, but we can take this a step further by adjusting the colors and adding a bit of saturation. This may make the colors look weird right now, but that's because we haven't changed the background yet. The thing to know about shadows is that they vary based on the context of the entire scene. For an image like this, the colors will look too dark and will stand out on a white background. But if we adjust the background, we can see that the colors were perfectly fine, and that it was just the surrounding colors that changed our perception. Let's take this concept of using multiply as a shadow and adjust them for different lighting scenarios. A night sky? Just use blue on a multiply layer and adjust the intensity. How about an evening sky? We'll follow the same concept and take the surrounding colors and use them in a multiply layer. This time, we'll use orange and apply it over the layer. As you can see, we get a similar result. Obviously, these are just a couple of scenarios, but I hope you can see the value of this tool. Underwater, in space, this concept of using multiply to match the background can apply to any color that you choose. Since we are already on the topic of shadows and lights, let's talk about lighten modes. Self-explanatory, but these layer modes are used to lighten an image. From the list of lighten modes, my favorites being screen or glow. If you have a bright light source in your illustration, you can make the light stand out more with a glow layer. Just use an airbrush and apply it to where the light source is coming from. This will make the light source appear to emanate out from the light source. This can be used for a variety of different light sources, such as fires, light bulbs, the sun, or anything that emits a light. Although this may be a bit more of a niche use case, I love using the screen layer to help convey that a material is clear. For example, I use a screen layer for glasses filled with white with the opacity turned down to show that the lenses are clear. I find that this gives a very nice effect for glasses and other types of materials that are clear. Next up are contrast layers, my favorite being an overlay layer. What does an overlay layer do to an image? This mode actually combines two different color modes into one. It will apply a multiply to darker colors and a screen layer to the lighter colors. I use this mode if I ever need to add contrast to an image, mainly to brighten it up. I make a new layer with overlay and clip it to the layer below and airbrush the color that I want. This will naturally guide your viewers to that area where the effect is being applied. I find that you usually don't need to add much to get this effect. If you overdo this, it can do the opposite effect, making your artwork hard to look at. This goes for every layer mode that I have demonstrated so far, but I find that overlay is one of the more sensitive ones. As I have demonstrated with the multiply layer, we can also use an overlay layer to match colors to the background too. For example, if there is a strong orange light in the background, we can pick that color and airbrush it on top with an overlay layer. This helps conveying the ambient light or bounce light that is in a scene. Finally, there are inversion modes. I honestly don't use these modes too often, but I will explain the one that I actually have a use for. The divide layer mode can be used on two layers that have differences, but you can't tell what the difference between them is. If you put the top layer into divide, you will see what has changed between the two layers. This will show you the differences between the images in case you accidentally changed something but can't tell what you did. The rest of the layer modes in the inversion category can give a sort of surreal effect, so you should definitely give them a shot if that is the kind of art that you're into. Obviously, these layer modes aren't a replacement to learning colors manually or a replacement for an actual color theory. They are a shortcut to picking colors for an illustration, but that doesn't mean that they are a bad thing either. They are a useful tool in the program that can help you speed up your process a lot, so I don't agree with the people that say that you should never use them. There's actually a really good page about them from Adobe if you want to go further in depth with the math that goes on behind the scenes with all the different layer modes. If you really wanted to, you could even calculate the colors these layer modes produce, but this goes way beyond the scope of what I'll be teaching today. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned some useful information today that you can use for your own illustrations. I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you again in another video. Bye bye, bye bye, bye bye.